A genuine question, why are the salaries in the UK so low? Every time I have to hear about an American salary, my mouth drops. My jaw is open. Pause. Heart sinks to my stomach, realizing how underpaid we are. These guys are talking about 100k a year as a truck driver, 200k a year as a lawyer, as a doctor. We're lucky if we get a quarter of that. Even the numbers don't make sense. Are Americans just on another level economically? 76k a year GDP per capita. Ours is 30k less. Where's the money going?
Earlier this year, a survey asked people across Britain a simple question. Where does the UK rank compared to individual American states in terms of average wealth per person? Most Britons guessed the UK would land somewhere near the top, wealthier than Middle America, at least, even if not quite California or New York. The actual answer stunned almost everyone who heard it. The UK does not rank near the top. It ranks below every single US state, all 50 of them, with only Washington, D.C. ahead of it. Not middle of the pack, dead last. This is the story of that number, why it surprised so many people, and what it actually says, and does not say, about life on either side of the Atlantic. Earlier this year, a UK think tank ran a nationwide survey asking British voters to rank the United Kingdom against all 50 American states by wealth per person. On average, people guessed the UK would land around 7th place. Wealthier than most American states, in their minds, even if not the very richest. The real ranking was not 7th. It was the last. Below Mississippi, below Arkansas, below West Virginia, the states most Americans themselves think of as some of the poorest in the country. When researchers shared the real numbers with participants, more than a quarter said they felt genuinely shocked. Others said they were disappointed or embarrassed. This was not a fringe reaction. It was the majority response from ordinary British voters confronting a number they never expected to see. Here is what the numbers actually show. Economic output per person in the United States sits somewhere around $90,000 a year. In the United Kingdom, that same figure sits closer to $57,000 to $62,000, depending on which measure you use. That is not a small gap. It means the average economic output per person in America runs roughly 40 to 50% higher than in Britain. Average salaries follow a similar pattern, with take-home pay in the US running noticeably ahead of the UK once converted into the same currency. To put that in a more concrete comparison, if the UK were somehow inserted into the list of American states, it would not land somewhere in the middle. It would land near the very bottom, behind states like Mississippi, Arkansas, and West Virginia, the states most often used in America itself as the benchmark for the lowest average incomes in the country. For a country that still thinks of itself, culturally, as one of the wealthier nations on Earth, watching that number line up behind nearly every American state, rich or poor, hits differently than a normal economic statistic usually does. So why did the guest miss by so much? Part of it comes down to how people picture wealth in the first place. Britain has global brands, a massive financial center in London, centuries of history, and a cultural footprint far bigger than its size would suggest. All of that creates an impression of wealth that does not always match the numbers underneath it. Meanwhile, plenty of Britons picture America through stereotypes of extreme poverty in certain regions, without realizing how far average income has pulled ahead almost everywhere in the country, not just in the wealthy coastal cities. Put those two mental pictures together, a slightly inflated sense of British wealth and a slightly outdated sense of American poverty, and you get a guess that lands nowhere near reality. Numbers like GDP per capita can feel abstract, so it helps to bring this down to something more personal. On average, an American worker takes home meaningfully more pay than a British worker doing a similar job, even after accounting for currency conversion. Average monthly earnings in the US sit well above the equivalent figure in the UK, a gap that shows up not just at the top of the income scale, but through the middle of it as well. Reactions to this fact, once people fully understand it, tend to follow a familiar pattern online. Some feel genuine concern about the UK's direction, pointing to years of slow wage growth and a stagnant economy back home. Others push back immediately, pointing out that raw income numbers do not tell the whole story of what life actually costs, or what that income actually buys once you account for taxes, benefits, and everyday expenses. Both reactions are worth taking seriously, because both are, in their own way, correct. quick pause before we get into what this number does not tell you. If you're finding this interesting, go ahead and subscribe, because we're comparing wealth and living standards across a lot more countries this month. And drop a comment. Did this number surprise you as much as it surprised the people in that survey? Let's keep going. Here is where the story gets more complicated, and it is important not to skip this part. Raw income and GDP per capita measure output and pay. They do not measure how much of that pay disappears into costs that, in Britain, are often built into taxes instead. Healthcare is the clearest example. In the UK, healthcare is funded through the tax system and free at the point of use. In the US, many workers pay for private health insurance directly, sometimes running into hundreds or even over $1,000 a month on top of everything else they earn. Add in differences in paid holiday time, hours worked per year, and the strength of the broader safety net, and the gap in take-home pay does not automatically translate into an equal gap in quality of life. One number rarely makes it into these viral comparisons: how many hours people actually work to earn that income. American workers, on average, work considerably more hours per year than British workers, and take far less paid vacation time. Some analyses suggest that once you divide income by hours actually worked, the American advantage shrinks significantly, and in some comparisons nearly disappears. This does not erase the original gap, but it reframes it. The question is not simply who earns more. It is who earns more, for how many hours of their life, and with how much time left over afterward to actually enjoy it. Money is not the only way to measure a country's standard of living, and on several other measures, the UK actually performs better than the United States. Life expectancy in the UK runs longer than in America. Homicide rates in the UK are dramatically lower. Paid parental leave, guaranteed time off, and access to healthcare without a direct bill at the register all tilt toward the UK side of the comparison, even while the raw income numbers tilt the other way. This is really the heart of the whole story. Wealth, on paper, is not the same thing as a good life, and both countries make different trade-offs to get the outcomes they get. There is another wrinkle worth mentioning. Even where Americans earn more, everyday costs in the US can eat into that advantage fast. Car insurance, health insurance, and childcare in America often run far higher than equivalent costs in Britain. Someone comparing a $200 car insurance bill in the US to a $200 bill in the UK might not realize one of those is a monthly payment and the other is an annual one, a mix-up that has genuinely tripped up people making this exact comparison online. Housing tells a similarly mixed story. American homes tend to be significantly larger than British homes for a similar price, which changes the picture once you measure cost per square foot instead of simply price per home. It is worth pointing out how Americans tend to react to this same conversation, because it rarely goes the way you would expect. Plenty of Americans watching this exact comparison do not respond with pride. They point out that median wages in the US have grown far slower than the overall economy over the past several decades, that wealth inequality in America runs deeper than in the UK, and that a booming GDP figure does not always reach the average household in the way these viral comparisons imply. In other words, both sides of this conversation end up, eventually, agreeing on the same uncomfortable point. A single number rarely tells the full story of what it is actually like to live somewhere. This gap did not appear overnight. It built up slowly, over more than 3 decades, and that timeline matters if you actually want to understand it. Back in 1990, the US and UK economies, measured per person, were much closer together than they are today. Since then, US output per person has climbed steadily, driven in large part by a handful of massive technology companies that grew into some of the most valuable businesses in the history of the world. The UK economy grew too, but at a noticeably slower pace, weighed down by weaker productivity growth, a financial crisis that hit London especially hard, and years of political uncertainty tied to leaving the European Union. By the time you reach the current decade, 3 decades of a slightly slower growth rate had compounded into the gap people are only now discovering in surveys like the one that kicked off this video. It is not that Britain suddenly got poorer. It is that America simply grew faster, year after year, for long enough that the difference eventually became impossible to ignore. Some of the most viral versions of this comparison get specific, matching the UK not just against the national US average, but against individual American states, and the results tend to surprise people even more. California alone, if it were its own country, would rank among the largest economies in the world, and its per-person output comfortably outpaces the UK's. Texas tells a similar story, driven by a mix of energy, technology, and a lower cost of doing business. But the number that tends to generate the loudest reaction online is the one involving states most people assume are struggling. Mississippi, frequently ranked as America's poorest state by several measures, still edges out the UK in output per person once the numbers are lined up side by side. For British viewers, that specific comparison, the idea that their entire country trails behind the state most Americans themselves consider the weakest link in their own economy, tends to land harder than any national average ever could. Income is only half of any honest comparison. What happens to that income afterward is the other half, and it changes the picture again. The United States, on average, taxes income at a lower overall rate than the United Kingdom, particularly for middle earners. That means a bigger share of a higher paycheck actually stays in an American worker's pocket, at least before private healthcare and other American-specific costs get factored back in. Britain, by contrast, funds a much larger portion of healthcare, education, and social support directly through the tax system, which means less cash in hand every month, but fewer sudden, unpredictable bills landing on individual households when something goes wrong. A steady number of British professionals, particularly in finance, technology, and medicine, continue to relocate to the United States every year, chasing exactly the kind of income gap this video has been describing. For some of them, the move pays off in a straightforward way. For others, higher rent, an unfamiliar healthcare system, and a thinner social safety net eat into the raw income gain in ways that are hard to appreciate from a distance, back when it was still just a number on a spreadsheet. So where does that leave the original question? By the strict measure of income and economic output per person, yes, the average person in Britain is meaningfully poorer than the average person in America, and by a wider margin than most people on either side of the Atlantic would have guessed. But poorer, in this narrow financial sense, does not automatically mean worse off across every measure that matters. Longer lives, lower violent crime, guaranteed health care, and more time away from work all pull the overall picture back toward the middle, even while the raw paycheck numbers keep tilting firmly toward America. The real answer, like most honest answers to big international comparisons, is that it depends entirely on which part of life you are trying to measure. And that's the number that stunned an entire country when they finally saw it laid out. If this changes how you think about wealth and quality of life, smash that like button. It really helps this channel grow. Subscribe if you're new, because we're breaking down comparisons like this between countries all month long. Drop a comment and tell me, does raw income convince you? Or do you think quality of life matters more? And check out the video right there on your screen, because you're going to want to see that one too. See you in the next one.